After 90 minutes of intense discussion, we asked each expert 3 questions. What myth must die? What are we doing wrong? What must the industry remember? Their answers challenge comfortable assumptions and reveal uncomfortable truths. From the illusion of transferred responsibility to the reality of safety theatre, these final reflections determine whether the new guide succeeds or merely shifts liability. David, you're looking suitably composed. Should we come to you first?
Sure, I'll throw myself out. I think one of the biggest myths from my experience and my stuff is that when the POAC or STS superintendent comes on board, that all the responsibility is taken away from the ship and the crew. Too many times have I stepped on board and everybody, oh, you're here. I don't need to do anything anymore. I have no more responsibility. All responsibility is yours. And it's not just one ship, it's both ships that say that to you. And you're like, no, I want to stress that that's person and overall advisory control, not actual overall control of everything. You still retain control of your ship's captain. And so I think that one of the things in the guide that does state that out a little bit more clearly is that the master still has a role and a responsibility in there, and I think that that's a really good piece to that. 10 years from now, I think that we're all sitting here thinking that nothing's going to change in 10 years. Everything's going to change in 10 years. It's always changing, and to sit here and say that this is the final document that we're going to see, or this is the final changes that we're going to see, that's just naive to think about. But in 10 years in 2 years we're going to probably have something completely different that's going to add some value to everything, and at every point it always does. And then the third part was? The one key takeaway. I think that us coming in this room and collaborating and talking about this and bringing so many different pieces together, and I think you and I were talking about this earlier, Ruth, is just that one of the things that as ITAL co-chair that I've strived to change is that barrier between STS providers and ship owners and everything, that we all have a responsibility to help improve this, to make the operation safer. All ship owners and everybody talks about safety first, which I think is a myth as well too in that regard, but the only way we're going to do that is by doing that all together to make STS operations safer, because it is a high-risk operation, it is dangerous, and there's a lot that gets involved in that. I think people forget about that, and I think that's what we need to take away, is that we can work together to improve this all together.
Thank you. Ruth, please.
Yeah, I can't stand questions like this, I have to be honest, and it deals in extremes, which I don't like either, because it's highly subjective. But I think the biggest myth or misunderstanding that people potentially will have when they're looking at some of these additional requirements in the guide is that it needs to, this is just an additional and needless administrative burden, and it's more bureaucracy. These positive safety steps require extra effort, but if you embed them in processes and everybody understands why they're doing, they can be adopted and just become part of day to day. So that's a biggest potential myth. And then I think, in 10 years, I can imagine there were many things we think we'll be doing wrong. I imagine technology will have moved on, and we'll be thinking that how we used to do these operations is completely crazy, given we could have been doing it however we'll be doing it in 10 years. Bit of a cop-out answer. But again, key takeaway, very similar to David. I think this has been a great bringing together of people who are involved in the same operation that don't often all discuss together, and I think that's really an area we can improve. We've worked very nicely with AET in Brazil over the last couple of years and beyond, and that's something I think we all can benefit from, because some of the elements that are in the guidance, like stop work authority that we're saying requires people to feel safe, everybody who's on board there, like I said, needs to understand that. So collaboration is key.
Thank you. Alex.
From my perspective, First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. I forgot to thank you, and for this unexpected call to discuss about such an important matter. The myth or misunderstanding that we face quite often in Dynamarine during the risk assessments and screenings is that the STS guide is just a guide and it's a best practice and you don't really have to follow it. So we end up explaining to ship owners and other interested parties that what is the best practice. So the definition of the best practice is it's something which includes minimum risk. So if you follow the best practice, there is a risk, but it's minimum risk. That's why we call it best practice. So taking into consideration what you have, what owners' responsibility is against the ISM code is that they have to keep risk to the minimum. Therefore, if you don't follow what the guide says, you have to explain how you ensure that the risk is minimum. And there is a process, a risk assessment process that ship owners guide. So literally speaking, to my understanding, the STS guide is not just a guide, it's a set of rules, okay, which in combination with MARPOL requirements and the ISM code includes many, could include traps for ship owners. Therefore, they need to have robust systems in place. As a key takeaway, I would like to think that I'm not an expert in actual STS operations. We are a risk assurance organization, so I would like to see more experts being involved in such writings of guides, because I have heard a number of people that had very nice ideas but could not be heard. So probably in 10 years' time, okay, there will be a wider committee comprising of experienced and well-renowned and service providers or other stakeholders, ship owners, with a sense of responsibility and a sense of safety culture to be part in drafting such guides.
Thank you. Andy?
I'd like to destroy the myth that when it's in the early stages of project development for floating LNG, where you have these discussions with commercial and legal teams that tell you that you can do ship-to-ship transfer in 3, 4, 5 meter swells at 3 knot current, at 3 knot currents and 40 knot winds. Why can't you do this? And the simple answer is we can't, because there's an operability window we have to work in, and that is governed by risk assessment and safety. I now feel more confident now with the second edition that when I'm actually sat, because that's my job, I sit in front of these guys and say, right, there's the OCMF guidance on ship-to-ship transfer, there's the SIG2 guidance on this, there's the ISGOP guidance. You need to read this and educate yourselves. Because I feel that there are too many people out there that are coming into this industry that don't have a background, who seem to think we can park a floating LNG here and LNG carriers are going to come and we can just put them back close together. And the reality is we can't do that. So that's the myth I want to get rid of. And you see this in project development all the time. And they don't cover it, and then when we get to project execution, the money's not there to face the reality. I think one of the things that we realise is the fact that we don't have that strong communication. It's coming, I know it's coming, but that's one of the things we need to improve a lot on how we communicate. How do we get the people at the coalface to communicate and they're taken seriously when they have these discussions. And the takeaway for me is that the risk assessment is critical. You've got to do a comprehensive risk assessment of these types of operations. And then you've got to go and back that risk assessment up with simulation, operational reviews, and involve all the various parties, from the pilots, forgive me, mooring masters, POAC, superintendents, the LNG captains, the tugboat captains, all of those guys have to be involved in the early stages.
Thank you. Carolina?
The myth on my side is probably that P&I clubs tell members what to do. No, we don't. We're really there to assist you, to help you make informed decisions, but the final decision rests with the shipping companies, the operators, with the charterers. They are there to take the decisions, but we're happy to assist. Reflect 10 years from now, what went wrong? Probably not appreciating how things will move quickly forward. I think I would reinforce that I don't think we're taking into account how the shipping industry is changing all the time, what role the AI might play in it, and how we might have to take that into account. And the key takeaway, I think I really appreciate that the human factor and human-centered design was the main factor of discussion today, and I hope it will be taken forward and embraced by more organizations.
Okay, at the risk of sounding super cynical, the myth for me is regarding the fatigue management. I just struggle to see in the modern era that we live in that that's particularly feasible with certain companies and managements, that fatigue management is really going to change for the better with all the commercial pressure and stuff like that. So yeah, I hope I'm wrong, but that would be the myth on my part. 10 years from now, I am curious to see if the shift in focus here to the shipping companies and the STS providers is going to increase the focus on liability over safety. Again, I hope not, but we'll see in 10 years from now, I guess. And key takeaway here, this is just re-emphasized for me how having open discussions with different stakeholders in the industry is so beneficial and so vital to all of us moving forward in the right direction.
Thank you. Darren, please.
Yep. Thank you. For me, I would say the biggest myth that I hope we have in our discussion have dispelled or tried to do away with is the myth that there is something, or this is new. The content and the guidance in the document is new. It's really not. We had a lot of discussion here around a risk-based approach to operations. This is not a new concept. Risk-based operations is not a new concept. The expectation that not just shipping companies, but companies in general that are engaged in higher risk activities, the expectation from the community, from global community, that organizations that are involved in higher risk activities conduct risk assessments before carrying out those activities. That's not a new expectation. But I think this document gives voice to that and provides a framework in how you might do that, provides considerations taken into account when carrying out those risk assessments. What would we look back in 10 years and say we got wrong? I would maybe turn it on the other way and look back 10 years from now to see what we got wrong back then. And it was not giving voice to the human factors and those considerations back then. Human factors is something that is being talked about much more commonly now, but human factors considerations are not new. The concepts they're human. They're innate in what we do. They're innate in relationships that we have with people, the way that people relate to the work environment. Those have been around for thousands of years, but we now have a field of study, a vocabulary that gives voice to those concepts that have been there forever and things that we've been living with for a long time. I wish that as an industry we had given a voice to and paid more attention to that earlier. And then not surprisingly, my biggest takeaway is the focus on your people. Doing right by your people, taking into account the people when you're developing procedures, when you're developing or designing equipment. Take into account the people that are going to be using that equipment. Take into account the people that have to put those procedures into practice, into effect, and think about them. And think about ways that I hate to say, but ways that they can fail, because that's one of the fundamental precepts of human factor study is that people will fail. And the key is how do we build systems and how do we build processes that are more are resilient to that human failure, and how do we help the people that are operating those systems, how do we help them recover from that failure?